I stood frozen at the marble reception desk of the Grand Palace Hotel, staring at the $4,000 bill I had no way to pay. My heart pounded as the reality sank in. My son Trevor and his wife Linda had just abandoned me after what I thought was a wonderful family weekend. The staff were beginning to look at me with suspicion. Then an elderly receptionist approached with a strange look on his face. Instead of demanding payment, he studied my face carefully and asked, "Are you Mr. Marcos's daughter?" I felt confusion mix with my terror. How did he know my father? And why was he asking about him now, as my perfect weekend crumbled into a nightmare of betrayal? 3 years had passed since my husband Jack died, leaving me alone in our modest 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Portland. The silence of my home had become both a comfort and a prison. I filled my days with routine tasks and volunteer work at the local library, but the evenings stretched endlessly before me. My relationship with my only son Trevor had grown increasingly strained since Jack passed. Trevor visited less frequently, usually only when he needed something. That Thursday morning in April, I was watering my small collection of houseplants when my phone rang. Seeing Trevor's name on the screen surprised me. Our last conversation had been tense, with him once again suggesting I sell the house Jack had left me. "Mom, I have something special planned," Trevor announced without preamble. "Linda and I want to take you to the Grand Palace Hotel this weekend. 3 days, 2 nights, 5 stars. Their spa is supposedly amazing." My hand froze on the watering can. "The Grand Palace?" "Trevor, that place costs a fortune." "Don't worry about it," he said, his voice unusually warm. "We want to do this for you. You deserve some luxury after everything you've been through." Joy bloomed in my chest. Maybe this was his way of reconnecting, of repairing our relationship. "That sounds wonderful, honey." "Great. Pack for Friday through Sunday. And Mom, bring something nice for dinner. The restaurant there is pretty fancy." After hanging up, I stood in my living room, smiling for what felt like the first time in months. I spent the next day carefully selecting outfits that wouldn't look too shabby next to Linda's designer clothes. My daughter-in-law had always been polite but distant, clearly from a different world than mine. Trevor picked me up Friday afternoon in his sleek black Audi. Linda sat in the passenger seat, her blonde hair perfectly styled, diamond earrings catching the light. "May, you look lovely," she said, as Trevor loaded my weathered suitcase into the trunk. Her smile seemed genuine, which was unusual. The drive to downtown took nearly an hour, and I listened as they talked about people I didn't know and restaurants I couldn't afford. Still, the anticipation of spending real time with my son outweighed any discomfort. The Grand Palace Hotel was more magnificent than I had imagined. A doorman in a crisp uniform opened my car door, while another took our luggage. The lobby gleamed with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and fresh flower arrangements taller than me. "Mrs. Bryant, welcome to the Grand Palace," the receptionist said warmly to me, making me feel important. Trevor had used my name when booking, not his. Our rooms were adjacent on the 12th floor, with a view of the city skyline that took my breath away. My room had the largest bed I'd ever seen, a bathroom with heated floors, and toiletries that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Do you like it, Mom?" Trevor asked, watching me take it all in. "It's beautiful," I whispered, feeling suddenly small. "Only the best for you," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Dinner's at 7. Why don't you rest for a bit?" That first evening set the tone for what seemed like a perfect weekend. Trevor ordered expensive wines I couldn't pronounce and insisted I try the lobster. Linda asked thoughtful questions about my volunteer work and showed me photos of their recent trip to Hawaii. When I reached for my purse to contribute to the bill, Trevor waved me away. "This is our treat, Mom. Every penny." Saturday brought breakfast in bed, a guided tour of the city's historical district, and lunch at a waterfront restaurant. Throughout the day, I noticed Trevor stepping away to take phone calls, his expression serious until he noticed me watching. Linda, too, seemed to be exchanging frequent texts, sometimes whispering to Trevor when they thought I wasn't paying attention. That evening, while Linda was getting a massage, I returned to my room to find Trevor in the hallway, apparently having just left my room. "Trevor? What were you doing in there?" He didn't even flinch. "Just making sure the housekeeping staff left you fresh towels." He smiled and kissed my cheek before walking away. Later, I noticed his suit jacket draped over a chair in the hotel lounge where we were having drinks. When he excused himself to the restroom, a voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like Jack urged me to check the pockets. Feeling guilty but determined, I quickly reached inside and felt a folded document. I pulled it out just enough to see the heading, Property Transfer Agreement with my address clearly visible. I slipped it back just as Trevor returned. The remainder of our evening continued pleasantly, but now I understood. This weekend wasn't about reconnecting. It was about softening me up to sign over my house. The house where Jack and I had raised Trevor, the only real asset I had left. The house Trevor had been pressuring me to sell for months, claiming it was too much for me to manage. As I lay in the luxurious hotel bed that night, I wondered what other motives might be hidden behind this supposedly generous weekend. For the first time, I began to question everything about these 3 days of unexpected kindness. Sunday morning, I decided to confront Trevor about the document I had seen. We met for breakfast at the hotel restaurant, Linda conspicuously absent. "She's getting her nails done," Trevor explained, buttering a croissant. "She wanted to look perfect for our last day here." I took a deep breath. "Trevor, I saw the property transfer document in your jacket pocket yesterday." His hand paused for only a moment before resuming its task. "Oh, that. I was going to mention it, but I didn't want to spoil our weekend." His smile was practiced, confident. "It's just something my financial advisor drew up. He thinks it would be smart for you to transfer the house to a joint ownership situation. For tax purposes." "Tax purposes," I repeated flatly. "Exactly. You'd still live there, of course. Nothing would change except you'd have less financial burden." He reached across the table and patted my hand. "I'm just looking out for you, Mom. Dad would want me to." The mention of Jack made my chest tighten. "Your father left the house to me, Trevor. And now I'm trying to help you manage it." His voice remained gentle, but I noticed the slight hardening of his eyes. "You're getting older, Mom. The property taxes keep going up. The maintenance is expensive." "I managed just fine," I said, though in truth, things had been tight since Jack passed. Trevor sighed dramatically. "Let's not talk about this now. This weekend is about you enjoying yourself." He signaled for more coffee. "Actually, Linda and I thought you might enjoy the spa this morning. They have a special package for hotel guests. Massage, facial, the works." I felt a twinge of guilt for suspecting ulterior motives. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Trevor really was just trying to help in his own way. "That sounds lovely," I conceded. "Perfect. You enjoy that while we take care of checking out. Then we'll all meet in the lobby at 1 to head home." The spa experience was indeed wonderful. For 3 hours, I was pampered in ways I hadn't been in decades. The tension melted from my shoulders as expert hands worked out knots I didn't even know I had. My face was cleansed and moisturized until I hardly recognized the refreshed woman in the mirror. Feeling renewed both physically and emotionally, I made my way back to my room to pack. Perhaps I had misjudged Trevor. Perhaps this weekend truly was a gesture of love. That optimism lasted exactly 12 minutes. When I tried to enter my room, the keycard didn't work. I tried again, then again, before heading down to reception. "I'm sorry for the trouble, Mrs. Bryant," said a young man at the desk after I explained the problem. "It seems the system automatically deactivated your card during checkout." "Checkout? I haven't checked out yet." The clerk tapped at his computer. "According to our system, your son processed checkout for the party about an hour ago. For his room, yes. Not for mine." More tapping. "I'm showing both rooms have been checked out, but..." He frowned at the screen. "The bill for room 1214 remains unpaid. Your son told the morning clerk that you had insisted on paying your own way." My stomach dropped. He said what? That you wanted to handle your portion of the bill separately. He paid for his room and the restaurant charges, but... He turned the screen toward me, showing a bill for $4,260. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely audible. "Trevor said he was paying for everything." The clerk's expression shifted from helpful to suspicious. "Perhaps you should call him to clarify." With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Trevor. No answer. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text. "Trevor, there's a problem at the hotel. Please call me immediately." I waited 10 excruciating minutes in the lobby, trying Trevor repeatedly. The clerk's eyes never left me. Finally, I checked my purse for my emergency credit card, the one I kept for true crises. It was gone. So was the $300 in cash I had brought for the weekend, just in case. The truth crashed down on me like a physical weight. Trevor had planned this all along. The entire weekend had been an elaborate setup, culminating in this moment of humiliation and panic. He had taken my emergency credit card and cash, leaving me stranded with a bill I couldn't possibly pay. As if on cue, my phone pinged with a text message from Trevor. "Mom, it's time you learned financial responsibility. Sell the house like we discussed. We'll come back for you once you sign the papers. The hotel has a business center where you can print and sign documents." I stared at the phone in disbelief. My own son had abandoned me in a luxury hotel with no means to pay an enormous bill, all to force me to sign over my home. The young clerk cleared his throat. "Mrs. Bryant?" "About the outstanding charges." I looked up, vision blurry with unshed tears. "I don't have the money," I admitted, my voice breaking. "My son, he took my credit card. He set me up." The clerk's expression hardened. "I'll need to speak with the manager." As he walked away, I sank onto a plush lobby sofa, remembering a news story from a few months back about an elderly woman arrested for fraud after her family left her with an unpaid hotel bill. Would I be next? Would I be let out in handcuffs, my name in the local paper, all because my son wanted my house? I had never felt so betrayed, so utterly alone. The hotel lobby suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. Other guests glanced at me with a mixture of curiosity and disdain as the young clerk returned with an older man in a tailored suit, presumably the manager. They spoke in hushed tones, occasionally looking in my direction. I thought about simply walking out, but where would I go? My purse contained nothing but my ID, phone, and house keys. No cash, no cards, no dignity left. The manager approached me, his expression stern. "Mrs. Bryant, I understand there's an issue with your bill." "My son," I began, hating how my voice shook. "He told me he was paying for everything. He took my emergency card and left me here." The manager's face remained impassive. "I see. Unfortunately, the charges remain your responsibility. If you're unable to pay, we'll need to explore other options." Those other options hung in the air between us, like a threat. Would they call the police? Hold my belongings hostage? As the manager began explaining their payment plan options, which sounded suspiciously like involuntary servitude, I noticed an elderly man watching us from behind the reception desk. He was tall and thin, with a full head of white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike the others, his gaze held no judgment, only curiosity. The manager was mid-sentence when the elderly man approached. "Mr. Thornton, if I may," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority despite his age. The manager paused. "Harold, we're in the middle of something here." "I can see that," Harold replied calmly. "I'd like a moment with Mrs. Bryant, if you please." Mr. Thornton hesitated, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes. He walked away, leaving me alone with the elderly receptionist. Harold studied my face with unexpected intensity. "Forgive me for asking," he said finally, "but are you Mr. Marcos's daughter?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Yes," I said automatically. "Anthony Marcos was my father." "How did you know that?" A smile transformed his face. "The resemblance is remarkable. You have his eyes. And that little crease between your eyebrows when you're worried? Pure Tony Marcos." "You knew my father?" I asked, bewildered by this unexpected turn. "I worked for him for 33 years at Marcos Construction," Harold said. "I was his administrative assistant from 1970 until he retired." I blinked in surprise. "I don't remember my father ever mentioning you." "That sounds like Tony," Harold chuckled. "He never was one to bring work home, but I knew all about you. He had your picture on his desk all those years." My confusion must have shown on my face. My relationship with my father had been complicated at best. Anthony Marcos had been a stern, often distant figure in my life, more concerned with his business than his family, or so I'd always believed. "I don't understand," I said honestly. "My father and I weren't close." Harold's eyes softened. "Maybe not in the way you wanted, but he was immensely proud of you, always talking about his smart, independent daughter. When you started teaching, he told everyone who would listen. When you got married, he had me order flowers for your wedding from 3 different florists because he couldn't decide which arrangement was best. Tears pricked at my eyes. This wasn't the father I remembered. He never told me any of this. Tony wasn't good with words, especially emotional ones, Harold agreed. But his actions spoke volumes. Do you know he used to drive by your elementary school during lunch break just to make sure you were playing with the other kids? He worried about you being shy. Each revelation felt like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known was missing. Why are you telling me this now? Harold glanced around, then lowered his voice. Because Tony made me promise something before he died. He said, Harold, someday my daughter might need help, real help. And knowing her, she'll be too proud to ask for it. When that day comes, I'm counting on you. My father died 15 years ago, I said, struggling to process this information. How could he possibly have known I'd need help now? He didn't know the specifics, Harold replied. But he knew your son. The statement hit me like a physical blow. Trevor? What about him? Harold's expression turned grim. Tony saw something in Trevor that concerned him, even when the boy was young. An entitlement, a willingness to use people. That's not fair, I protested automatically, though my recent experience suggested otherwise. Trevor is just financially minded. Is that what you call abandoning your mother with a $4,000 hotel bill? Harold asked gently. The blunt assessment stripped away my last defenses. How did you know about that? I'm still a receptionist, Mrs. Bryant. I see and hear everything that happens in this lobby. He paused. Your father predicted something like this might happen, especially after your husband passed. He said Trevor would try to take financial advantage of you. I felt dizzy with the implications. That's impossible. My father couldn't have known Jack would die before me, or that Trevor would. I couldn't finish the sentence. Tony Marcos was a perceptive man, Harold said simply, and he loved you enough to prepare for even the worst possibilities. He glanced at his watch. Mr. Thornton will be back any moment. Come with me, please. Without waiting for a response, Harold led me through a door marked staff only into a small office. He closed the door behind us, then turned to a filing cabinet in the corner. Using a key from his pocket, he unlocked the bottom drawer and removed a sealed manila envelope, yellowed with age. Before he died, your father gave me this, Harold explained, handling the envelope with reverence. He said, Give this to my daughter when you see her in trouble. Real trouble. I've kept it safe all these years, waiting for this day. He placed the envelope in my trembling hands. He made me promise not to tell you about it until the right time. I think this qualifies. I stared at the envelope, my father's familiar handwriting spelling out my maiden name across the front. What's in it? I don't know, Harold admitted. That was between you and your father, but whatever it is, Tony believed it would help you when you needed it most. I carefully broke the seal and opened the envelope, pulling out several folded documents and a handwritten letter. The sight of my father's strong, slanted handwriting brought unexpected tears to my eyes. As I began to read, Harold discreetly stepped toward the door. I'll give you some privacy. Take all the time you need. Alone in the small office, I unfolded my father's letter with trembling hands. The paper was thick and cream-colored, clearly expensive stationery that had been preserved perfectly in the sealed envelope. My father's distinctive handwriting filled the page. My dearest May, it began, using the nickname only he had ever called me. If you're reading this, then Harold has determined you're in serious trouble, most likely because of Trevor. I hope I'm wrong about this. Nothing would make me happier than being proven an overly suspicious old man. But my instincts rarely fail me in business or in life, and they're screaming at me about your son. I paused, the words blurring as tears filled my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, my father was more perceptive than I had been about my own child. I've watched Trevor grow up with increasing concern, the letter continued. The way he manipulates to get what he wants, the entitlement he displays, his disregard for others' feelings or needs. These are not qualities that fade with age, May. They intensify. I remembered the countless times I'd made excuses for Trevor's behavior over the years. The borrowed money never returned, the broken promises, the subtle digs about my lifestyle or choices. Each incident viewed in isolation seemed minor, but together, they formed a pattern I had refused to see. After Jack's heart attack last year, my father wrote, and I realized with a start that he must have written this shortly before his own death, I became concerned about your future security. Jack is a good man who loves you deeply, but his health is precarious. If something happens to him, Trevor will see you as vulnerable, as a target. My breath caught in my throat. How could he have known? Jack had indeed survived that first heart attack, only to succumb to a second one 3 years ago. And just as my father predicted, Trevor's behavior toward me had changed almost immediately afterward. I've taken steps to protect you, the letter continued. The documents enclosed represent my attempt to ensure your security regardless of what Trevor might try. I've established a trust in your name that Trevor cannot access or influence. I've purchased a second property that no one knows about, not even Jack. The deed is included here. It's a small cottage on Lakeview Drive, fully paid for. If you ever need to escape or start fresh, it's yours. I quickly shuffled through the other papers and found the deed, made out in my name. A property I never knew existed. A safety net my father had created for me 15 years ago. There's more, his letter went on. I've had Trevor investigated. The report is included in this package. I take no pleasure in this, but you deserve to know the truth about your son's finances. He's been gambling since college, accumulating significant debt. He's borrowed from people no one should ever be indebted to. If he's pressuring you for money, this is likely why. With shaking hands, I found the report my father mentioned. Pages of financial investigations, surveillance photos, and credit inquiries. One photo showed Trevor meeting with a man identified as a known loan shark. The report was dated just weeks before my father's death, but the pattern it documented stretched back years. Finally, my father's letter concluded. There is a bank card enclosed with this letter, along with account details for a fund I've established for emergencies exactly like whatever you're facing now. The PIN is your birth month and day. Use it wisely, but don't hesitate to use it when truly needed. This money is yours, free and clear. The card was indeed there, still valid according to the expiration date. The account statement showed a balance that made me gasp, enough to cover the hotel bill many times over. Enough to give me breathing room and options I hadn't had moments ago. May, I wish I had been better at showing you how much I love you. Words never came easily to me, and I know I seemed distant when you were growing up. Please know that everything I've done, including this contingency plan, has been out of love for my only daughter. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself. And remember that you are stronger than you know. All my love, Dad. I sat perfectly still, the letter in my lap, tears streaming down my face. All these years, I'd believed my father hadn't really known me or cared deeply about my life. I'd interpreted his reserve as indifference. Now I realized he had been watching, caring, and even planning for my protection long after he was gone. The trust documents revealed another layer to my father's foresight. He had created a separate trust with specific provisions that it could only be used for my living expenses and health care. Trevor could not access it as my next of kin, not even if he claimed I was incompetent. My father had anticipated and blocked every possible angle. Among the papers was a recent surveillance report dated just 2 months before Jack died. My father had maintained the investigation into Trevor even after his own diagnosis with terminal cancer. The report detailed Trevor's mounting gambling debts and his meetings with increasingly dangerous creditors. One particularly chilling note indicated Trevor had discussed his potential inheritance from me with these individuals. The most shocking document was a handwritten note from my father to Harold, explaining why he had chosen him as the keeper of these secrets. Harold, you've been my most trusted confidant for over 30 years. You've seen my daughter grow up through the photos on my desk and my stories about her. You know how much I love her, even if I've never been able to express it properly to her. I'm entrusting you with her safety because you're the only person who has never let me down. When the time comes, you'll know it. Trust your judgment and help my May. A gentle knock at the door pulled me from my daze. Harold peered in, his expression concerned. Are you all right, Mrs. Bryant? May, I corrected automatically. Please call me May. I gestured to the papers spread before me. Did you know what was in here? Harold shook his head. Only that your father believed it would help you in a serious crisis. Was he right? I nodded slowly. He knew. Somehow, he knew exactly what would happen. I picked up the bank card. This will cover the hotel bill, and much more. I'm glad, Harold said, genuine relief in his voice. Your father was a good man, May. Complicated, but good. I'm just starting to understand that, I admitted. All these years I thought he didn't really see me or know me. but he saw everything, including things I refused to see myself. Harold smiled gently. That was Tony. Quiet observer, meticulous planner. I began gathering the documents, carefully returning them to the envelope. Harold, thank you for keeping this safe all these years. For recognizing me. For everything. I made a promise, he said simply. And your father was the kind of man you kept promises to. As I stood to leave, a new thought occurred to me. Harold, does Trevor know you worked for my father? I don't believe so. I retired the year before you married Jack. I've only been working here part-time for the past 5 years, just to keep busy. Pure coincidence that you ended up here. He paused. Or perhaps not. Your father always said there's no such thing as coincidence. Armed with my father's unexpected gift and a new understanding of both him and my son, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Trevor had underestimated me for the last time. With my father's resources and foresight backing me, I now had the power to confront the situation on my own terms. Harold, I said, a plan already forming in my mind, could I ask you for one more favor? After settling the hotel bill with my newly discovered bank card, I asked Harold for a quiet place to make a phone call. He led me to an empty conference room with a view of the city skyline. The space felt appropriately formal for what I was about to do. I called Trevor, surprised by the steadiness of my voice and the newfound confidence flowing through me. He answered on the third ring. Mom? Did you get everything sorted out? His tone was casual, as if he hadn't just abandoned me with a massive bill I couldn't pay. Not yet, I lied, keeping my voice deliberately fragile. The hotel manager is being very unpleasant. They're threatening to call the police. That's ridiculous, Trevor scoffed. It's a civil matter, not criminal. Well, they seem quite serious. I paused. Trevor, I don't know what to do. I think I'm ready to discuss the house. The change in his tone was immediate and telling. Really? That's great, Mom. Actually, I have the paperwork with me. I could come back to the hotel, help you sort this out. Would you? That would be such a relief. I infused my voice with pathetic gratitude. I'm so confused and frightened. Of course. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Just sit tight. After hanging up, I spent the next 20 minutes reviewing the documents my father had left me, particularly the investigation into Trevor's gambling. The most recent reports showed debts exceeding $200,000, with increasingly threatening communications from his creditors. This explained his desperation to get his hands on my house. Harold knocked softly before entering the conference room. Your son is in the lobby, he informed me. Is he alone? No, there's a blonde woman waiting in the car. I can see it from the front entrance. Linda. Of course she was involved. Thank you, Harold. Could you show him up? I arranged the conference room strategically, placing myself at the head of the table with my father's envelope and its contents spread before me, visible but not immediately identifiable. When Trevor walked in, his expression was a carefully constructed mask of concern. Mom, are you okay? This whole situation is outrageous. He moved to embrace me, but I remained seated, stopping him short. I'm better now, I said calmly. Please, sit down. Confusion flickered across his face as he took the seat across from me. He placed a folder on the table between us. I brought the papers for the house transfer. Once you sign these, I can get you a cashier's check to cover the hotel bill. I smiled thinly. That's very thoughtful. But before we get to that, I have some questions. Mom, I don't think this is the time for questions. The hotel manager could walk in any minute. Actually, I've asked not to be disturbed. I opened the folder he'd brought, pretending to review the documents. This transfers complete ownership of the house to you, not joint ownership as you suggested yesterday. He shifted uncomfortably. It's simpler this way. Legally cleaner. I see. I closed the folder and pushed it aside. And when were you planning to tell me about your gambling debts? The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? I slid one of the surveillance photos across the table. It showed Trevor with a heavy-set man outside a known underground gambling establishment. This man, Joey Salerno. He's not the kind of person one borrows money from lightly. Trevor stared at the photo, then at me, genuine shock replacing his practiced concern. Where did you get this? That's not important right now. What matters is that I know Trevor. I know about the $200,000 you owe to people who break kneecaps for late payments. I know this isn't about protecting me or tax benefits or any of the other lies you've told me. This is about saving yourself." His shock quickly morphed into anger. "You had me investigated? Your own son?" "No," I said truthfully. "I didn't need to. Others saw what I refused to see." I gestured to the papers before me. "I know everything, Trevor. The gambling that started in college. The money you borrowed from your father without telling me. The credit cards you've maxed out. The reasons Linda's parents stopped speaking to you." His eyes darted around the room as if seeking escape. "This is ridiculous. You're making things up to avoid dealing with the house." "Am I?" I pulled out another document, this one showing loan applications using my address as collateral. "You've already tried to take loans against my house, haven't you? Using forged signatures. That's why you're so desperate to get it transferred legally. The banks are asking questions." Trevor's facade cracked completely. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. These people don't take no for an answer. They've threatened Linda, for God's sake." "So you decided the solution was to threaten me instead? To abandon your mother in a hotel with no way to pay? To steal my emergency credit card?" Each question felt like releasing a weight I'd carried too long. "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "I just needed you to understand how serious this is. The house is just sitting there, mostly empty. You could live somewhere smaller, and it would solve everything. Everything for you, nothing for me." I leaned forward. "Tell me, was this elaborate weekend your idea or Linda's?" His eyes flickered toward the door. "What does it matter?" "It matters to me." A new voice answered from the doorway. It was mine, actually. Linda stood there, elegant as always in her designer clothes, but her expression was strained. "I didn't expect him to abandon you, though. That part was all Trevor." Trevor spun around. "Linda, what are you doing?" She entered the room fully, closing the door behind her. "I'm done, Trevor. Done with the lies, the debt collectors calling at all hours, the constant fear." She turned to me. "May, I had no idea he left you with the bill. He told me you had plenty of money and wanted to pay for your own room to feel independent. When I saw him take your credit card from your purse yesterday, he said you asked him to hold it for safekeeping." The betrayal cut deeper somehow, knowing he'd lied so effortlessly to both of us. "And the house? Did you know about his plans for that?" "He said you'd agreed to help us get back on our feet temporarily." She laughed bitterly. "There's nothing temporary about $200,000 in gambling debts." Trevor stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're both overreacting." "Sit down," I said with a quiet authority that surprised even me. Trevor sat, more out of shock than obedience. Linda moved to stand beside me rather than him, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on any of us. "I've been planning to leave for months," she admitted. "I just needed to figure out how to do it safely. These men he owes, they're dangerous." "So you decided to use my mother as your financial escape plan?" I asked. She had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm not proud of it. But yes, I thought if he got the house, he could pay off the worst of the debts, and I could leave without fearing for my life." She pulled a folded paper from her purse and placed it before me. "This is a copy of our most recent bank statement. See for yourself what you're dealing with." The statement showed multiple transfers to unnamed recipients, cash withdrawals at casino ATMs, and a balance hovering near zero. Their financial situation was even worse than I'd imagined. "You're both unbelievable," Trevor spat, ganging up on me when I'm trying to solve problems for everyone. "By stealing from your mother?" Linda challenged. "By lying to your wife? That's not solving problems, Trevor. That's creating them." I gathered my father's documents and returned them to the envelope, then stood. "This meeting is over. Trevor, I will not be signing over my house. Not today. Not ever." "Then you're signing my death warrant," he said dramatically. "These men will kill me if I don't pay. That's a problem of your making, not mine." My voice remained steady despite the turmoil inside. "I suggest you speak to a bankruptcy attorney and a gambling addiction counselor, in that order." "You can't be serious," he sputtered. "You'd let your own son face these consequences alone?" "No," I corrected him. "I'm not letting you face them alone. I'm making you face them at all, possibly for the first time in your life. There's a difference." I turned to Linda. "Would you like a ride somewhere?" She nodded, relief visible in her eyes. please. As we turned to leave, Trevor made a last desperate attempt. Mom, wait. We can work something out. A loan, maybe. Just enough to get these guys off my back. I paused at the door. I'll think about how I might help you, Trevor. But it won't involve my house, and it won't happen today. You abandoned me in this hotel. Left me frightened and humiliated. Actions have consequences. With that, Linda and I walked out, leaving Trevor alone in the conference room with his failed scheme and unpaid debts. In the elevator, Linda wiped away tears. I really am sorry, May. I should have said something sooner. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But right now, let's focus on getting somewhere safe. As the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I caught sight of Harold watching us with approval in his eyes. My father's loyal friend who had kept faith all these years, waiting for the moment when I would need the protection my father had so carefully arranged. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt not just angry or betrayed, but truly strong. The path ahead would be complicated, but I was no longer walking it blindly or alone. I returned to the hotel the next morning with a clear plan and a newfound determination. Harold greeted me with a warm smile that made me feel like an expected and welcome guest rather than the desperate woman from the day before. Good morning, May. How are you feeling today? Like someone who's finally woken up after a very long sleep, I replied honestly. Harold nodded as if this made perfect sense. I took the liberty of reserving the same conference room for you today, and there's someone I'd like you to meet. He led me to the conference room where I'd confronted Trevor. Waiting inside was a woman in her 40s, with Harold's same blue eyes and direct gaze. She stood as we entered, extending her hand. May Bryant? I'm Amanda Wilson, Harold's daughter. I understand you've had quite a situation develop. Harold beamed proudly. Amanda is an attorney specializing in elder law and financial abuse cases. I thought she might be able to offer some guidance. I shook her hand, touched by Harold's thoughtfulness. Thank you for coming. I could certainly use some legal advice. Dad explained the basics, Amanda said, gesturing for me to sit. Your son abandoned you with a hotel bill as part of a pressure tactic to get you to sign over your house. Is that correct? I nodded, the events of the previous day still raw. Yes, and I've since discovered he's been trying to access my accounts for months. Unfortunately, I see cases like this frequently, Amanda said, her expression sympathetic but professional. Financial exploitation by family members is more common than most people realize. The good thing is, you caught it before signing anything, and you have documentation of his intentions. For the next hour, Amanda helped me understand my options. We reviewed my father's trust documents, which she declared impressively thorough, and discussed additional protective measures. She suggested placing a fraud alert on my credit report, changing all passwords and account numbers, and documenting Trevor's actions in case further legal steps became necessary. What about his gambling debts? I asked. He claims these people are dangerous. Amanda's expression turned serious. That's likely true, but it's a separate issue from protecting your assets. You're not responsible for debts he incurred, and sacrificing your financial security won't solve his gambling addiction. I don't want to see him hurt, I admitted, despite everything. Of course not. You're his mother, Amanda said gently. But enabling his behavior isn't helping him. The best thing you can do is ensure your own security first, then consider how to help him address the real problem. By midday, we had implemented a comprehensive protection plan for my finances. Amanda had helped me contact my bank to secure my accounts and arranged for a locksmith to change my house locks that afternoon. After Amanda left, Harold invited me to have lunch in the hotel restaurant. On the house, he insisted. After what happened, the manager was quite mortified when I explained the situation. Over lunch, Harold shared more stories about my father that painted a picture so different from the distant man I remembered. Tony was intensely private about his feelings, Harold explained. But he talked about you constantly at work. When you got your teaching degree, he ordered champagne for the entire office, said his daughter was going to shape the next generation. I had no idea, I said, finding it difficult to reconcile this version of my father with my memories. He kept a file of all your achievement certificates, report cards, everything, Harold continued, called it his May folder. It was the only personal item on his otherwise immaculate desk. As we talked, Other hotel staff stopped by our table. The young clerk from the day before, now identified as Jason, apologized for his initial suspicion. "If I'd known you were Mr. Marcos's daughter, I would have handled things differently. Your father built half the commercial properties in this city, including this hotel." I was startled by this information. This hotel? I had no idea my father was involved with the Grand Palace. "He was the primary contractor," Harold explained. "He rarely took credit publicly for his work, but his company built this place from the ground up 30 years ago. That's why I started working here after retirement. Felt like keeping a connection to Tony." By mid-afternoon, I had paid a courtesy visit to the hotel manager, who was now almost comically accommodating, and gathered more information about Trevor's activities during our stay. Several staff members reported seeing him making intense phone calls in secluded corners of the hotel, and one bellhop overheard him arguing with someone about getting the papers signed. With Amanda's help, I had discovered that Trevor had been spreading concerning rumors about my mental competence to friends and family members. He had told our longtime family doctor that I was becoming forgetful and had asked about the process for establishing guardianship. He had even approached my neighbor Joan about strange behaviors he claimed to have observed during his infrequent visits. The scope of his betrayal was breathtaking. This hadn't been a sudden decision born of financial desperation. This had been a calculated, long-term strategy to gain control of my assets. Using my father's bank card, I paid for another night at the hotel. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now freely choosing to stay at the establishment where I'd been abandoned just a day earlier. But I needed time to implement all the protective measures Amanda had suggested, and returning to my empty house felt unappealing. That evening, Harold knocked on my door. "May, I hope I'm not disturbing you, but there's something else you should know." He handed me a folder containing printouts of loan applications in my name, with signatures that were clear forgeries of my handwriting. These were submitted to 3 different banks in the past month, all using your house as collateral. One was approved pending final verification. I stared at the documents in horror. "Where did you get these?" "Amanda has contacts in banking fraud departments. When you mentioned your concerns about Trevor possibly forging documents, she made some inquiries." He paused. "There's something else. According to her sources, Trevor has been telling these lenders that you're in the early stages of dementia and have asked him to handle your finances." The betrayal cut even deeper, not just theft, but an attempt to erase my competence, my autonomy, my very self. "He was trying to have me declared incompetent," I said, the realization hitting me fully. "It appears so," Harold confirmed gently. "But he's failed. You have the documentation to prove otherwise, and with Amanda's help, all these applications have been flagged as fraudulent." I spent that night in the luxurious hotel room that had been the setting for such betrayal, but now felt like the birthplace of a new chapter in my life. I was no longer the naive mother who made excuses for her son's behavior. I was Anthony Marcos's daughter, stronger and more resourceful than I had realized. In the morning, I would return to my home with new locks, secured accounts, and a legal team aware of Trevor's actions. I had resources I never knew existed thanks to my father's foresight. Most importantly, I had clarity about my situation and the determination to protect myself. Trevor had underestimated me, just as I had underestimated my father's love and protection reaching across 15 years to safeguard me when I needed it most. The reversal was complete. I was no longer the victim in this story, but the author of what would happen next. Over the next 3 months, I reclaimed my life piece by piece, building something stronger and more authentic than what had existed before. The day after my confrontation with Trevor, I returned home to find Linda waiting on my porch with her suitcases. "I had nowhere else to go," she admitted. "Trevor went ballistic after you left. Smashed things in our apartment. I grabbed what I could and left while he was out." Though still processing my own feelings about her role in Trevor's scheme, I couldn't turn away someone clearly in fear. "You can stay in the guest room temporarily," I offered. "But we need to establish some ground rules." Those first few weeks were awkward, but ultimately healing for both of us. Linda revealed the full extent of Trevor's gambling and the increasingly desperate measures he'd taken to hide it from both of us. She'd been raised in wealth but had been cut off by her parents when they discovered Trevor's addiction shortly after the wedding. Too proud to admit her mistake, she'd stayed, becoming gradually entangled in his schemes. With Amanda's continued legal guidance, I implemented comprehensive protections for my assets. The trust my father had established proved invaluable, as did his documentation of Trevor's early gambling habits. Amanda filed for restraining orders based on Trevor's threats and attempted fraud, ensuring he couldn't approach my home or contact me directly. "What you're doing isn't punitive," Amanda assured me when I expressed guilt. "It's protective. There's a difference." Harold became a regular visitor, bringing lunch every Tuesday and sharing more stories about my father. Each anecdote helped me reconstruct the man Anthony Marcos truly had been, beyond my limited childhood perspective. I learned about his quiet philanthropy, his loyalty to employees, and the depth of his love for me that he'd never been able to express directly. "Your father wasn't perfect," Harold acknowledged during one of our lunches. "He worked too much, kept his feelings bottled up, could be stubborn to a fault, but he loved you with everything he had. That's why he created all those safeguards. He knew he wouldn't be here to protect you himself." 6 weeks after the hotel incident, Trevor was arrested for attempted fraud related to the forged loan applications. The arrest proved to be a turning point. Facing actual legal consequences for perhaps the first time in his life, Trevor finally acknowledged the severity of his gambling addiction. I didn't bail him out. Instead, I worked with Amanda to arrange for him to enter a residential treatment program for gambling addiction as part of his plea agreement. The program was strict but effective, requiring complete honesty, financial transparency, and regular therapy. "You're doing the right thing," Harold assured me. When I questioned whether tough love was truly love at all, "Your father would have done the same." Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let people face the consequences of their actions. During this time, I discovered a new purpose that brought unexpected joy. Jack had been an amateur woodworker, his garage workshop filled with tools that had sat unused since his death. One afternoon, seeking comfort in memories, I entered the workshop and found myself drawn to a piece of maple he had been preparing to turn into a table. What began as a way to feel close to Jack evolved into a genuine passion. I took classes at the local community workshop, learning techniques Jack had tried to teach me years ago when I'd been too busy to pay attention. Working with my hands provided both meditative calm and creative fulfillment I hadn't experienced in decades. By the time summer arrived, I had transformed Jack's workshop into my own space and produced several pieces of furniture that friends actually wanted to buy. What started as therapy became a small business, Second Chance Furnishings, specializing in pieces that, like me, were entering their second act. Linda stayed for 2 months before finding an apartment of her own and a job at a local real estate office. Despite her role in Trevor's scheme, I found myself forgiving her as I witnessed her genuine efforts to rebuild her life honestly. We maintained a friendship that would have seemed impossible that day at the hotel. "You didn't have to help me," she said the day she moved out, "after what we tried to do to you." "Maybe I needed to help you to fully help myself," I replied, surprising myself with the insight. Holding on to anger takes too much energy. The most profound change came in my understanding of family. Trevor remained in treatment for 90 days, during which our only contact was through monitored family therapy sessions. These difficult conversations revealed patterns of entitlement and manipulation that had developed far earlier than I had realized or wanted to admit. "You keep saying you failed as a mother," his therapist observed during one session. "But that assumes you had complete control over who Trevor became. Parents influence but don't determine who their children become." Trevor made his own choices. When Trevor completed the residential portion of his treatment, I agreed to a carefully structured relationship moving forward. No financial support, no unsupervised access to my home, and a requirement that he continue outpatient therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. "I don't deserve another chance," he said during our first post-treatment meeting at a neutral coffee shop. "This isn't about what you deserve," I told him honestly. "It's about what I choose to give. There's a difference." Our relationship would never return to what it had been, but perhaps what it had been wasn't worth preserving anyway. What emerged instead was something more honest, with clearer boundaries and genuine accountability. 10 months after the hotel incident, Harold invited me to a special dinner at the Grand Palace. "The manager wants to make amends properly," he explained, "and there's something I'd like to show you." I arrived to find not just Harold but Amanda and several other staff members who had become friends during my ordeal. The manager presented me with a commemorative plaque. "In honor of Anthony Marcos, whose craftsmanship built this establishment, and his daughter May, who demonstrated the same integrity and strength in her own life. The plaque would hang in the lobby, alongside a photograph of my father during the hotel's construction. It was a public acknowledgement of both his legacy and my own resilience. After dinner, Harold presented me with a small wooden box. I found this in Tony's things after he died. I was waiting for the right moment to give it to you. Inside was a collection of small mementos. My first tooth, a crayon drawing I'd made in kindergarten, the ribbon from my high school graduation, and a strip of photos of my father and me from a boardwalk photo booth when I was about 8. In every photo, I was laughing wildly while my stern father's mouth twitched with suppressed amusement. He kept these in his desk drawer, Harold said, the things that mattered most. That evening, sitting in the hotel that had witnessed my greatest humiliation and subsequent rebirth, I realized the full circle of my journey. My father, whom I had misjudged as distant and uncaring, had provided the means for my protection decades after his death. My son, whom I had defended and excused for years, had plotted to take advantage of me, but was now on his own path of accountability and recovery. And I, who had defined myself primarily as a wife and mother, had discovered strength, creativity, and purpose I never knew I possessed. The painful betrayal at this very hotel had ultimately led to the greatest gift, the chance to truly know both my father and myself. 1 year after Trevor abandoned me at the hotel reception desk, I hosted a dinner in my home. Around my table sat an unlikely family, Harold and Amanda, Linda and her new boyfriend, 2 friends from my woodworking class, and Trevor, now 1 year sober from gambling, and working a steady job for the first time in his adult life. The table we gathered around was my own creation, built from the maple Jack had selected years ago, designed with techniques my father's money had allowed me to learn, and shared with people who had entered my life through both betrayal and kindness. As I looked around at this unconventional family, I understood the lesson my journey had taught me. True family isn't always defined by blood, but by choice, by truth, and by the willingness to see people as they really are, rather than who we wish them to be. My father had seen me more clearly than I realized. I had finally learned to see others, and myself, with the same clarity. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't blind acceptance, but honest reckoning. Sometimes the most important family members are the ones we choose or who choose us. And sometimes a painful betrayal can be the catalyst for the life we were meant to live all along. Have you ever discovered that someone you misjudged actually understood you better than you realized? Or have you found strength in yourself during a crisis that you never knew existed? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and share it with others who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your power. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you clarity and strength on your own path.